Remember when your grandmother pulled out that stained community cookbook, the one with grease marks on the Bannock page and purple smudges from crushed berries? There was a time in Canada when these recipes weren't Instagram trends or restaurant curiosities. They were the backbone of everyday meals, pow-wow gatherings, and family tables from the prairies to the Pacific. Today we're exploring 15 native Canadian recipes you'll wish you knew sooner. Whether you remember the smell of cedar smoke at a summer festival, tasted wild rice your uncle harvested by canoe, or simply heard stories about pemmican from history class, you're about to discover the real food that shaped this country. These aren't fancy chef creations. They're humble, powerful dishes that carried communities through seasons and generations. Which ones did your family make? Let's dig in. Bannock Open. Any community cookbook from the 70s and you'll find at least 3 Bannock recipes, maybe more. That's because Bannock became the Swiss Army knife of Indigenous kitchens. Simple, adaptable, and absolutely reliable. The basic recipe? Flour, baking powder, salt, fat, and water. Mix it quick, cook it in a hot skillet, or bake it in an oven. What you get is a golden disc of bread that tears open steaming hot, perfect for soaking up stew or slathering with butter and jam. Bannock's roots trace back to the fur trade days. Scottish traders brought simple flour-based bread, and Indigenous cooks made it their own. By the 60s, it was everywhere. Métis families fried it for breakfast. First Nations communities served it at gatherings. Your friend's mom might have a batch cooling on the counter when you came over after school. Picture a 1983 kitchen. Cast iron skillet hissing with lard. Someone's grandmother flipping Bannock rounds with practiced ease, each one puffing up golden brown. Kids hovering nearby, waiting to snag the first piece while it's still too hot to hold. At powwows, Bannock stands became fixtures. You'd smell them from across the field. That yeasty, buttery aroma cutting through dust and sweetgrass smoke. People lined up for fresh rounds, some plain, some stuffed with berries or meat. Powwow Bannock tacos. Take Bannock. Top it with seasoned ground beef, lettuce, tomatoes, cheese, and maybe some hot sauce. Congratulations, you've just made a powwow taco. This wasn't a restaurant invention, it was festival food, born from practicality and community fundraising. By the 70s, Bannock taco stands were standard fixtures at gatherings across the country. They raised money for youth programs, elder care, and community events. Picture a summer afternoon in 1989. Grass field, colorful tents, drumming echoing from the circle. You're hungry, and you follow your nose to the Bannock taco stand. Someone's uncle is working the fryer, pulling out perfect golden discs. His daughter assembles tacos assembly line style. Meat, lettuce, tomato, cheese, paper plate, napkin. Next. You'd balance your plate on your knee, sitting in a lawn chair watching dancers in full regalia. The Bannock was still warm, slightly crispy on the edges, soft in the middle. The toppings were simple but satisfying. Nothing fancy, nothing Instagram-worthy, just good food at a good price, made by people you probably knew. Every community had its own style. Some used beef, others bison or elk. Some piled on the toppings, others kept it minimal. But the core concept stayed consistent. Bannock as a base, whatever you wanted on top. Manoomin wild rice with Gaiman Anishinaabe. They call it Manoomin. In English, wild rice. But neither name captures what it really represents. A sacred food, a seasonal ritual, a connection to water and sky, and generations of knowledge. Harvesting wild rice is a 2-person job. One paddles the canoe through shallow lakes. The other sits in front, holding 2 wooden sticks called knockers. They bend the rice stalks over the canoe and tap them gently, letting ripe grains fall into the boat. It's slow, careful work. You can't rush it. By the 70s and 80s, many families still harvested rice this way every fall. They'd spread it on tarps to dry, roast it lightly to loosen the hulls, then winnow it clean. What you got was nutty, chewy, deeply flavorful rice, nothing like the bland stuff in grocery stores. At dinner, that rice became the foundation for simple, satisfying meals. Steamed with duck broth and tossed with roasted duck or venison, sometimes just with butter and herbs. The rice itself had enough flavor that you didn't need much else. Picture a November evening in 1981, cold settling in outside. Inside, a stock pot releases steam that smells like cedar and earth and something slightly sweet. Someone lifts the lid, and there's the rice, dark grains mixed with tender duck, maybe some wild onions, a bay leaf. You'd eat it with Bannock for soaking up the broth. Kids might complain at first. It wasn't macaroni and cheese, but they'd clean their bowls anyway, because it was good, really good. Telling and preparing this video took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the video. 3 sisters, corn and bean soup. The Haudenosaunee call them the 3 sisters, corn, beans, and squash. Plant them together, and they help each other grow. Corn provides a stalk for beans to climb. Beans fix nitrogen in the soil. Squash leaves shade the ground and keep moisture in. Harvest them together, and you get a nutritionally complete meal. The 3 complement each other perfectly. Proteins, carbs, vitamins, minerals, everything a body needs. By the 70s, this soup was still common on family tables, especially in communities connected to Haudenosaunee traditions. It wasn't fancy, just corn, beans, squash, simmered in broth, maybe some herbs. Picture a January afternoon in 1976. Snow piled high outside, kitchen windows fogging from the steam of a big pot bubbling on the stove. Someone's mother ladles out bowls, creamy yellow corn, soft beans, orange squash chunks floating in rich broth. You'd eat it with Bannock, naturally. The soup warmed you from the inside out. Simple ingredients, but the combination was magic. The corn added sweetness, the beans, earthiness, the squash, a subtle richness. This soup represents agricultural genius, passed down through centuries. The 3 Sisters system fed communities long before European contact, and it continued to feed families well into the 20th century. Some people still plant this way, honoring the relationship between the crops. Cedar plank salmon. On the Pacific coast, this method is older than Canada itself, older than European contact, older than written history. You take a cedar plank, secure a butterflied salmon to it, and lean it beside a fire. The cedar does 2 things. First, it perfumes the fish with that distinctive woody, slightly sweet smoke. Second, it makes the whole operation easier. No grill, no pan, just fish and wood and fire. By the 70s and 80s, this technique was still common at family gatherings and community events. Someone would set up a fire pit, lean the planks at an angle, and tend them while people talked and kids ran around. Picture a summer evening in 1984. Beach on Vancouver Island, fire crackling in a stone-ringed pit. 3 cedar planks lean at careful angles, each holding a bright pink salmon fillet. Smoke ribbons around the fish, and the smell, cedar and char and ocean, drifts on the breeze. You'd eat that salmon hot off the plank, flaking apart with your fingers, tasting smoke and salt and the sweetness of perfectly cooked fish. Maybe with some boiled potatoes and greens on the side, maybe just the fish, because it was that good. Salmon candy, take salmon. Cure it with salt and sugar. Smoke it low and slow. Brush it with maple syrup or berry glaze. What you get is salmon candy, deep red, slightly sticky, sweet and smoky, and utterly addictive. This was preservation that doubled as a treat. The smoking and curing meant the fish would keep for weeks. The glaze made it special enough to serve at gatherings or give as gifts. By the 80s, many families still smoked salmon in backyard smokehouses or adapted modern smokers to traditional methods. You'd see strips hanging on racks, slowly darkening as smoke worked its magic. Picture a September afternoon in 1988. Small smokehouse in the backyard, built from plywood and old screens. Inside, racks hold rows of salmon strips, each one glistening with maple glaze. Wood smoke seeps through the cracks, and the smell makes neighbors wander over to see what's cooking. You'd eat salmon candy as a snack. Grab a piece, tear it with your teeth, let the sweet smoky flavor fill your mouth. Kids loved it. Adults loved it. Visitors, always left with a small bag as a gift. Moose stew with root vegetables. In northern communities from Yukon to Labrador, moose stew was Tuesday dinner, nothing fancy. Just slow-simmered moose meat with potatoes, carrots, onions, and whatever herbs you had. Moose meat is lean and rich, darker than beef. When you stew it low and slow, it becomes tender enough to fall apart with a fork. The vegetables soak up the broth, and the whole pot becomes more than the sum of its parts. Picture a January evening in 1979. Small house, cold pressing against the windows. Someone's father lifts the lid on a big pot, and steam billows out. Inside, chunks of moose, orange carrots, pale potatoes, all swimming in dark, rich broth. You'd eat it with bannock for dipping naturally. The stew warmed you through, filled you up, and cost less than beef from the store. Plus, if you or someone you knew had hunted the moose, there was pride in that. Providing for your family, using the whole animal, staying connected to the land. This stew fed families through long winters. It was affordable, nutritious, and deeply satisfying. You could make a big batch and eat it for days, the flavors getting better each time you reheated it. Caribou stew. In Arctic communities, caribou stew is what moose stew is to the subarctic, everyday comfort food. The thing you make when it's 40 below, and you need something that sticks to your ribs. Caribou meat is similar to moose, but slightly sweeter, leaner. Cube it, brown it, add root vegetables and herbs. Simmer until tender. Serve with bannock or biscuits. Feed your family and probably half the neighborhood too. This was country food, the term northern communities use for traditional foods harvested from the land. Not restaurant food, not store food, country food, the stuff that sustained people for generations. Picture a March evening in 1986. Yellowknife, small kitchen, frost patterns on the window. A stock pot, bubbles on the stove, caribou and vegetables merging into something that smells like home. You'd eat it in deep bowls, using bannock to chase the last bits of broth. Outside, the temperature was brutal. Inside, you were warm, full, and content. Caribou stew survived because it's practical and necessary. In communities where fresh vegetables are expensive and limited, stew makes the most of what you have. The meat provides protein, the vegetables add vitamins, and the broth keeps you hydrated in the dry Arctic air. Arctic char pipsy. Take a char, that cold water fish with pink flesh and delicate flavor. Butterfly it, salt it, hang it outside to dry in the sun and wind. What you get is pipsy, or pitsik, depending on the region, paper dry fish that keeps for months and tastes intensely of the ocean. It's light enough to pack for travel, nutritious enough to sustain you through hard work, and delicious enough to serve at special occasions. This was preservation technology perfected over centuries. No refrigeration needed, no canning, just salt, sun, and wind. Picture a July afternoon in 1983. Arctic community, outdoor racks hold rows of butterflied char, each one slowly drying in the constant daylight. The fish snap when you touch them, papery dry and stiff. You'd eat pipsy as a snack, tear off a piece, chew it slowly, let the concentrated flavor bloom in your mouth. Or you'd rehydrate it and add it to soup. Either way, it was food that traveled well and lasted long. Pemmican with Saskatoon berries. Pemmican might be the ultimate survival food. Dried meat pounded into a powder, mixed with rendered fat, studded with dried berries, often Saskatoons, those sweet tart prairie gems. The result is a dense, high-calorie bar that can last for years. It fueled long journeys, harsh winters, and the entire fur trade economy. Hudson's Bay Company bought tons of it from Métis and First Nation suppliers. By the 70s and 80s, fewer people made traditional pemmican. It's labor-intensive, drying the meat, pounding it, rendering the fat. But some families kept the tradition alive, especially on the prairies where Saskatoon berries still grow wild. Picture a stone mortar and pestle. Someone's grandmother pounding dried bison into fine shreds, mixing it with tallow and dried Saskatoons, forming it into patties wrapped in cloth for storage. You wouldn't eat pemmican for pleasure, exactly. You'd eat it because you were traveling or working hard and needed fuel. But those Saskatoon berries made it better. Little bursts of sweetness cutting through the rich, fatty meat. Pemmican represents indigenous innovation at its finest. It solved a real problem, how to preserve meat without refrigeration, and became so effective that it powered an entire industry. Saskatoon Berry Jam. Saskatoons, Amelanchier alnifolia, are prairie magic. They taste like blueberries with an almond hint, and they grow wild across the prairies and northern regions. For generations, families picked them by the bucketful every summer. Some eaten fresh, some dried for pemmican, and plenty turned into jam that would last through winter. The process was simple. Berries, sugar, heat, stir until it thickens, pour into jars. By September, you'd have shelves lined with purple jars, each one holding summer sunshine. Picture a July morning in 1977. Family walking through prairie scrubland, buckets in hand, picking Saskatoons from low bushes. Purple-stained fingers, the sound of berries pinging into metal pails. Later, in the kitchen, those berries would bubble in a big pot. The house would smell sweet and slightly nutty. Someone would test the jam by dropping a spoonful on a cold plate, watching to see if it set. You'd eat that jam on Bannock, naturally, or on toast, or straight from the jar with a spoon when no one was looking. It was summer captured in glass, a taste of home that lasted all year. Soapberry Indian Ice. Cream. In interior Salish communities, soapberries became something magical, whipped into a frothy dessert called seksusum. The process is simple but specific. Take soapberries, add a tiny bit of water, whip vigorously until they foam up into pale pink clouds. The natural saponins in the berries create a stable foam, light and airy. The taste is tart, slightly bitter, nothing like commercial ice cream. You might sweeten it with a bit of sugar or berry juice, but traditionally it was served as is. By the 80s, fewer people made seksusum regularly. It takes effort, a lot of whipping, and the taste is an acquired one. But at gatherings and special occasions, someone would often bring a bowl. Picture a summer potluck in 1985. Long tables covered with dishes. Someone sets down a bowl of pale pink foam. Kids approach cautiously, try a spoonful, make faces. Adults smile. They remember that tartness from their own childhoods. You'd eat it in small amounts. It was rich despite being light, and the flavor was intense. Some people loved it, others didn't, but everyone recognized it as something special, something that connected them to older ways. Labrador tea. Not technically food, but Labrador tea was such a staple that it belongs on this list. Rhododendron groenlandicum, an aromatic shrub that grows across northern regions. Steep the leaves in hot water, and you get a resinous, slightly citrusy brew. It was medicine, beverage, and daily ritual. Some people drank it every morning. But here's the thing, you had to be careful. Brew it too strong, use too many leaves, and you'd get sick. Aunties taught their nieces and nephews the right amount, the right steep time. Respect the plant, don't be greedy. Picture a December evening in 1974. Small cabin, snowmobile parked outside. Someone pours hot water over dried Labrador tea leaves in an enamel mug. The scent, pine, citrus, earth, fills the room. You'd sip it slowly, letting the warmth spread through you. It wasn't coffee, wasn't regular tea. It was something older, something that connected you to the land in a direct, tangible way. Labrador tea survived because the knowledge was carefully maintained. Elders taught the younger generation not just how to harvest and brew it, but why it mattered. This wasn't just a drink. It was a relationship with a plant, a piece of living tradition. Great Lakes whitefish. In Ojibwe communities around the Great Lakes, whitefish, a tikamig, was weeknight dinner. Simple, affordable, delicious. The preparation was straightforward. Fresh whitefish, herbs, maybe some lemon, breadcrumbs on top. Bake until the fish flakes easily. Serve with vegetables and bread. By the 70s and 80s, many families ate whitefish weekly. It was local, sustainable, and cheaper than beef. Plus, it tasted clean and mild, perfect for kids who were picky about fish. Picture a Thursday evening in 1982, kitchen in Thunder Bay. Mom pulls a sheet pan from the oven. Golden brown crumbs cover 3 whitefish fillets. Butter sizzles. Lemon thyme scent fills the air. You'd eat it at the kitchen table, everyone serving themselves from the pan. The fish was tender, flaky, subtly flavored. Not fishy, not overwhelming. Just good, clean protein that made you feel satisfied without feeling heavy. Whitefish remained popular because it was consistently available and consistently good. Great Lakes commercial fisheries provided steady supply, and the simplicity of preparation meant anyone could make it, no special skills required. Cedar smoked salmon strips. We end where we started, with salmon and cedar, but this time, thin strips smoked until they're lacquered and dark, somewhere between jerky and candy. This was preservation, celebration, and skill, all wrapped into one. Families would smoke salmon in batches, storing strips for winter, or sharing them at potlatches and gatherings. The process took time. Thin cut the salmon, cure it lightly, hang it in the smokehouse over smoldering cedar or alder, tend the fire, wait, check, wait some more. When it's done, you have strips that keep for months and taste like smoke and sea and tradition. Picture a fall weekend in 1978. Small smokehouse behind the house. Inside, rows of salmon strips hang from racks, slowly turning from pink to deep mahogany. Wood crackles quietly. Smoke seeps through gaps in the walls. You'd eat these strips as snacks, tear them with your teeth, chew slowly to release all the flavors. Or you'd bring them to gatherings, lay them on a platter, watch them disappear as people help themselves. This technique survived because the results are perfect. The smoking preserves the fish and adds incredible flavor. The thin strips are portable, durable, and delicious. What more could you want? If you enjoyed this trip through Canada's Indigenous kitchen, hit that like button and subscribe for more food history and nostalgia.